once again to the Rock and Horror Podcast Show. As always, I am your host, Rob Nicholson, here in the frozen tundra of Hopatcong, New Jersey, joined by a special guest, my wonderful, wonderful partner in life, Gina Bongiorno. Gina, how are you tonight?
I am well. I am toasty under. I have a blanket
Yes,
on
you do.
underneath this and lots of fleece, and we have a heater, and yeah. So happy that it's the end of the week.
This gentleman sitting right in front of you has kind of meandered his way through the pantheon of pop culture, starting with All My Children on television and all the way through. And that is none other than, and because this is for all my Office fans out there, none other than Tom Halpert himself, Blake Robbins. Blake, welcome to the show.
Nice to see you. Nice to be with you.
A lot of people know you from Oz. A lot of people know you just from was it 2 or 3 episodes of The Office that you were in, ultimately?
I don't know. I don't know how to count it a little bit. We were in the Practical Joke episode,
Yep.
Where we met, Pam and at the restaurant, and we did that. Then we did the wedding episode, which was a 2-part episode, sort of the whatever they called it, Niagara 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
So we were in those. There was an episode later that came a few years later where I did a reading from it was supposed to be a flashback.
1 Corinthians.
There you go. Where they had me do some reading. Jim and Pam's marriage was a little bit on the rocks, and they had this kind of flashback to me reading from the Bible during the wedding. I guess to set those things, the wedding day,
Sure,
to the present moment with them. They did that like it was archive footage. However, it was not archival footage. We had to recreate. We had to go back to that location because we didn't shoot that during the wedding episode.
Wow.
So it was several years later. But yes, I got a phone call out of the blue saying, "Hey, are you available next week to come back and do something?" I was like, "Sure, send me the script." They were like, "Oh, well, there's no script." Basically because they knew the script was the Bible,
right?
And they were just going to have me read a passage. But yeah, they found some photos and tried to recreate as if it had happened, several years earlier, which it had. But so I guess that was an episode.
But 2.1 or 2.5. 2.8.
Depends on whether you're asking an Office fan or if you're asking like how many episodes do I get paid residuals for.
Right.
I think technically I might get residuals for 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 5.
Okay.
I am recognizable for a brief moment in a clip show that they put together at one point. It's kind of one of the lesser episodes of The Office, if you ask me. Not that there are lesser episodes, but it was called The Banker.
Okay.
And that was basically a show, essentially a show with a lot of footage from previous episodes.
Right. And it was right before the sale to just gonna say Sabre.
Sabre.
right before Sabre. Tell me about how you got your start on The Office.
It was I hadn't really done. There's my puppy Ray making a quick exit entrance, which is actually the reason I bring her up is because not Ray, who I've only had since August, but 2 other dogs and I were at the dog park walking, my previous puppies.
Okay.
And I got a phone call from my manager saying, "Hey, can you get down to Allison Jones's office by like 2:00?" This is like 2 hours later, 3 hours later. I lived up in Santa Clarita at the time. And it was it was unusual in that they weren't sending me any script, that I had never been to Allison Jones's office. However, I knew her, in her illustrious career, and that I was going to receive the script when I got there, and I wouldn't be able to leave the office with it. And that I don't know if they made me sign a non-disclosure about that. Maybe I signed it when I was handed the script. So anyway, rushed down there. Don't know what I'm auditioning for. as a huge fan of The Office and knowing that she cast the show The Office, as soon as I started looking at the material, even though all the names were changed, I knew immediately this is to play Jim's brother. Just something about and it wasn't exactly, I can't even remember if it was the material that we ended up auditioning with. I think it was something from Employee Transfer, which was that prank show. I guess somewhere along the line, I learned that they were looking for actors that were 6'2" and above.
Oh, okay.
That was part of the casting requirement. So I think that's, I happen to be an actor who is 6'3", 6'3" and a half. So I was on the shorter end of what they were looking for. But it had to be at least 6'2", or else they weren't bringing you in. And so it went in. I was a huge fan of the show, so I was definitely nervous. But the material read pretty, it was good material. They gave me like 9 pages, so there wasn't I couldn't do anything other than kind of just read it and respond to her. But I remember part of me as an actor thought to myself, the thing about The Office is none of these people on the show are actual actors. So I was thinking to myself, don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be nervous, be awkward, don't have any relationship with, like, actors pretend the camera's not there.
Sure.
Right. But on the show, they actually make a point, especially Jim's character, of acknowledging the camera, and he starts to develop a relationship. And that's part of the fun is, oh, look what's happening. Look, he comments on it, things. So because I knew it was Jim, I also made my best Jim look at the camera like, I made sure I threw that into the audition.
Right.
And I just went with the awkwardness of the whole thing. Like, I don't know these lines, you know what I mean? So I could have been an accountant from New Jersey, like they were looking. I could have been. And I just, whatever actor intuition I had was, don't do this that well. Actually be as clumsy as you feel. Mm-hmm. You don't know these lines. You don't know what you're really doing. You don't know why you're here. And it's all kind of odd. So allow that to inform how you audition. I didn't try to be too funny. I didn't try to be too straight. I did look at the camera a few times and go, well, that's it. I don't know what else you need.
I love that.
And in fact, at the time when I auditioned, I think they originally saw me for the younger brother. I think I went in and they just looked at me and said, well, I don't think he's younger. I think, he's this. So, you know what I mean? So it was just about them finding the right puzzle piece. So it's more like, don't screw it up for yourself,
mm-hmm.
and also don't try to overthink it, because it is a puzzle piece. You either fit or you don't. And so the only thing I tried to kind of focus on is, don't be an actor doing this, be an actual average Joe who's been pulled off the street to try and, just deal with this situation. So the camera can make you a little uncomfortable. The situation can make you a little uncomfortable. That's okay. And because that's how, Jim's brother being pulled into the documentary.
Right.
I mean, not The Office, but being pulled into a show where they're actually creating a documentary is weird. So the fact is that, if you're in on it and you've known for years that Jim's works for this paper company, but they're making this crazy student film or documentary type thing, that maybe your chance to be on there is like, oh, you know what? We're going to entertain the camera a little bit too, have a little fun, chew the scenery a little bit, come up with our own ideas, all those things. So that was kind of the spin.
And both you and Tug, who played your brother and Jim's other brother, you guys nailed every single part of that episode. And
you're too kind.
It was so, and I say that because it was so cringy. I mean, you guys were really beating the hell out of Pam. I mean, wow.
I remember my first approach when I get cast, right? I get the call and I'm like, holy crap, I'm going to be on The Office, which for me would be like you getting cast on The Office.
Right.
Like you're like, holy shit. Am I going to really be on The Office? Because I love that show.
Yep.
So I'm worried right away, like, oh, I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to mess it up. I'm not going to be any good. I'm going to be the worst thing on The Office. Okay.
Right.
But all right. But I still get to do it.
It's still there.
But it was like Willy Wonka golden ticket time, because as an actor, I hadn't really done a lot of, I mean, I've done comedy, I've done stage
Sure.
comedy, I've done some things. I mean, you do horror, so I don't know if you're aware of the film Rubber, but I was in
Yes.
this movie Rubber that's a
Okay.
really funny in a different kind of way. So I've done comedy and everything, but I wasn't getting those, like I wasn't regularly showing up in Allison Jones's office. I was more showing up in things like Criminal Minds and Oz and, you know, and that type of world. So I felt like I had been plucked out of my life, even as an actor, and put into this thing. So I was like, holy crap, excited, nervous, anxious, but I felt like a fan who won a lottery ticket to, okay, you get to be on the show. And I was like, two things. One, when I got there, I just soaked it up. I was just a sponge. I was just on set whenever I could be around to watch them work, to see how funny they were. But the reason I brought this up, I was going towards this note. I had this idea of doing it with a little bit of subtle sophistication. I don't know why. I was completely wrong or whatever, but I was going to do this kind of nuanced sort of thing. That was my brainchild. I don't know. I was just going to do this thing. And the director of the episode said, no, you guys are just douchebags. I said, what? He's like, just full on as douchey as you can be. He's like, there's a reason that Jim turned out the way Jim did, and it's because you guys were being douchebags around him the last 30 years. And the douchey, he was like, if you can out douche Michael Scott, I was like, well, that's nearly impossible. But okay, we'll see. But a different kind of douchebaggery, you know. He's got this really kind of ridiculously charming, endearing, you know, lovable at the same time. He's completely. You know.
Well, and with Michael Scott, you see his heart. So with
you
you guys,
and his naivety too, to certain things. Like he just doesn't know any better in a lot of circumstances. But you guys were like classic siblings who, you know, you can tell that there was, you know, because it never works with three, because there's always then two ganging up on one. And you know, it's interesting that you say that. Like I never really thought about how like that would have formed Jim and how he would have you know, it almost makes a little bit more sense like why he was easily goaded into the whole Dwight antics too, because this was, you know, his upbringing, so to speak.
And quite frankly, I mean, I know at least one of you because it's mentioned. I don't know if both of you in the episode are from New Jersey or not, but
I think my character is from New Jersey and his character may have been Connecticut or upstate New York, or you know,
it's still tri-staters. And you know, we actually own the market on douchebags. I think it's in the state constitution. So
New Jersey.
And we're very proud of our state. We love our state.
I'll also throw in, because I think it's widely known, there's been a few interviews that we were based on John's actual brothers.
I have heard that.
Yeah, there was some sort of tip of the hat to his actual brothers that he was raised with, his tall, you know, someone. I'm sure they're much better human beings than his brothers on the TV show, but for comedic purposes. And but yeah, there was talk. We knew they use, I think, words like possible recurring.
Okay.
You know, you're going to be a guest star in this episode, but it's possibly recurring. Anytime your last name's Halpert on The Office, you think it's possible recurring. However, there are other people on the show with the last name Halpert, some sisters and things.
Yes.
You know? So as an actor, you certainly feel blessed. And the thing is snowballed, you know, into, I mean, even at the time, it was a prized possession gig. You know, as an actor, you hope to be affiliated with casts and shows and work and actors and be around people like that. But it has even exceeded my expectations. I never thought there would be conventions that I would be paid money to travel to, be put up, and thousands of people would come and be so excited to meet you, to shake your hand, to you know, the conventions are much better than the internet. On the internet, you know, people have no problem letting you know how much they hate Jim's douchebag brothers. But in person, it's like, oh, no, you guys are fun. You guys are nice to be with. You're good people, whatever. One fan the first day who said, I wasn't sure if I wasn't getting Friar Fest. You know what I mean? I'm paying all this money and I'm going to show up and there's going to be an empty hotel.
If I have to wait in line 2 hours to meet Brian Baumgartner or 2 hours to meet you or 2 hours to meet it, I don't care.
Nobody has to wait 2 hours to meet me. That's the beautiful thing. If you want to meet me, I think the longest wait we may have had was 90 seconds. So we're there. We're there too.
We didn't wait in very long lines either.
No, they really weren't bad.
Navigate it.
Right.
But you know what? Those people haven't done other conventions and
Sure.
things. Anyone's complaining they don't have anything to compare and contrast it to. And it was my first time too. But look, it is what it is.
Mhm.
Where else are you going to, I know I was staying at a hotel and I was meeting fans 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
I was having breakfast with fans. I was in my buffet for my fake eggs, with kids taking photos, whatever. And I know it's not the same for everyone. I mean, there is a hierarchy, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And some of those people are, a little more protective of their time and space. And I certainly understand why, because they deal with it every day.
Yes.
I mean, we don't have to name names, but if you're and everyone deals with it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't deal with celebrity like that every day. So my bandwidth for it, which is, is a little bit like, hey, for these 4 days, I'm available to talk, meet, whatever. And even then I got exhausted. Do you know what I mean? I got exhausted. I got to where I was like, you know what? I just got to go up to my room and hide for a few hours. I'm kind of an introvert, like a lot of actors are. I'm not that, that you do the thing, but I get exhausted, and you are kind of on from 10 in the morning to, in the hotel, this and that. But the fans made it a beautiful, beautiful weekend because they know the show. They have incredible appreciation for the people that put the show on, and all of us in our and they know the specificities, the details, and their appreciation for who we are and that we were involved in it. Look, I'll be blessed to the day I die to be affiliated with that show. And I have a feeling, depending on what the next 10, 20, 30, hopefully, because it could be 10 days. No one knows how much time we're given. But I just knock on some wood and startle my dog. But just like, someone's here. I just knock on some wood because I don't know how long I'm going to live. But if my obituary says Tom Halpert on The Office, I'll be more than pleased, more than happy. And truth of the matter is, it's about those fans, because the thing has grown exponentially since it went off the air. The appreciation for it, you know what I mean? You watch some things and they just don't hold up. You watch The Office and it's as good now as it ever was when they made it. In fact, probably couldn't even be, that was some of the debate at the convention was how much of the actual Office that was made could be made today. I mean, could you do what was the episode? Diversity Day.
I was just going to say Diversity Day.
And I think they should absolutely do Diversity Day now, because it's needed more than ever. And it's a comedic, satirical look at it. And it is like saying, what's wrong? What is wrong with the universe that this is, that he's this guy? I'll tell you, as a fan of the show, to be able to have a front row seat to watch. I mean, I was sitting in the wedding pews during a lot of the scenes that had nothing to do with me, because we were all just there. We were at the church, we were hanging out. The same thing when we were at the rehearsal dinner, we're all hanging out, everything's around. So you can kind of, as long as you don't interfere with the work, kind of creep around. And I mean, I was sitting in the pews during some of the scenes that didn't make the final edit, having to do with Oscar and Brian, the shoes.
Oh my God.
Thing, whatever it is. And I remember at one point I laughed out loud, and I don't know if I spoiled the take or not, but I was like, oh, I got to go hide. I was way out. I got to be careful I don't get myself in trouble here, because just as a fan of the show, I felt like I was watching a theatrical performance of The Office,
right?
And just getting to see, and and that was the beauty. Also, watching Michael, watching Steve Carell work, watching Rain work. It was like an MFA and comedic acting, and the amount of ownership they had over the parts, the material, and every show is beautifully scripted, and that's the fun part of it. And the entire ship is scripted, shot, but from there, all hell breaks loose.
Right.
And to watch them kind of do these things, and I may be talking out of turn to say, you can see Steve Carell as Michael Scott going, I'm going to make these motherfuckers laugh.
Yep.
and doing it. I mean, when he tried to do the whole smart cars comedy bit.
Oh my God.
Him, I don't know how much of it was scripted, how much of it wasn't, but I just remember thinking, you know what? I'm going to think he's funny as hell. Yep. Because everyone else was watching him horrified. And I remember there was a little clip of, they did a shot back at us kind of watching, and everyone else is kind of like, oh, it's a car accident. Steve Carell's doing comedy. Yep. And I was like, oh. I just thought, oh, that's an interesting choice that Jim's brother thinks that Michael Scott's funny.
He's so ridiculous. You have no choice but to laugh.
But almost every single one on that show is someone you would love to spend an hour with. You know,
that's so nice to hear too.
And as someone in the business, that is a rarity. That is a rarity. That's not how it goes. That is an exception. You can be proud to be a fan of the people who created and were behind and in front of the camera on that show. They're almost all really, really wonderful people. And Jenna Fisher is at the top of the list. She's
now. Do you think that's why when these conventions come up and Hamila said to me that she was shocked at the amount of people that just came up to her and said, thank you for just what you did in the show. And I think about that all the time. And again, comfort blanket, whatever you want to call the show. If everything finds you where you are, you meet people where they are. So you behind a screen, whatever you may have done, it may have been a joke that you said, it may have been a line that you said, it may, whatever, just a facial resemblance. And that person was touched by you in some way. So now when they have a chance to see and meet these people that have been part of whatever in their lives.
I won't be surprised going forward ever since that convention.
Yeah.
It was humbling. Again, not every character on the show is as lovable as every other character. And I know that there are people that didn't love the brothers,
right?
For whatever reasons. Just, some of that was the effectiveness of what we did. We did our jobs. We did it maybe too well to some degree. And I have no problem with that. I don't, everyone's entitled to their opinion on that or not. But the people that show up at a convention love the show, and they had an appreciation for every single person who contributed to that thing that they love. And because the show turned out to be this magical thing, this alchemy that came together, because I don't know if it's already happened or not, but I think there will be people in the mental health industry looking at this time period of COVID and all this stuff and kind of the impact a show like Office had on the people that were watching it through that time. And, I hear Billie Eilish, her fandom is pretty well known for the show.
Yep.
And her own forthcoming with her own mental health issues and struggles. And I think what you've talked about a few times has kind of touched on what I think you're talking about, which is there's some healing that goes on to have something that is funny and touching, and that you can find something new, but at the same time, it's almost like taking a hot bath. It's almost like it's content consumption that allows people to heal and just feel better. And so there is something going on that. I do think people who have mental health issues do gravitate to this show, but in a healing way.
Sure.
Because I've met many, and certainly at a convention, many people talk about how it got them through divorces. Deaths of family members. There was a couple of women that came to celebrate a friend who had committed suicide.
Oh my goodness.
That friend had turned them on to the show, and then had taken her life. And they came to celebrate that woman. Any actor is grateful to be a part of something that helps. You know what I mean? That has an impact, right? I mean, I don't know. When I got into this business, I didn't know if I'd get a job, and it took years to get jobs. So I can't help but be anything but grateful. But to then be affiliated with something. So yeah, the hugs and the thank yous are genuine from the people that are there.
I often say that one of my greatest rewards being an actor is that we give people the chance to go in another room and just forget about things for a while, whatever the things may be, whether it's political or, a death or the news, just in general, and we're able to number one, get rid of poison that we have inside, and also give that other person some place to just say, oh, you know what? I don't have to worry about anything just for a little bit of time. And I think that's why when I do binge listen or binge watch the show, number one, it spurs creativity in me. But it also just, if I'm having a crap day or whatever, I can laugh. And it used to be just music that did that for me. I had to blast a certain song or a certain genre or whatever. And now it's not that. And, Friends was the same way for me. And it used to be, I used to split the year between Friends and The Office.
Well, you know what? I'll give you an example. What I had a thought when you were talking about Friends. Very enjoyable show, great show. But almost everyone that showed up as a guest star was a celebrity.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You kind of knew them from somewhere. I mean, that was the formula of the show. You basically had the core 6 of them, and then you had the attractive partners and the funny partners and whatever. But the guest stars were almost a collection of celebrities.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
everyone
they could push that as and that was fun. Part of the fun was watching, Brad Pitt show up, and blah, 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 but they could do that. But The Office, until the last few seasons where they did some of that themselves, with certain people, but the beauty of the show was, and I'm going to tell you a funny story. I think it's funny. I don't know if anyone else will. A Mickey Rooney story.
Okay.
Because it ties into this, what I'm saying. But the rest of us were, veteran. We were like character actors. Like, maybe if someone watched Oz, it was fun for them to see me not as Dave Brass, see me show up. Someone was a huge fan of Firefly. I mean, these are some of the shows that had mass followings, and people would say, oh, that's Agent McGinnis from Firefly or whatever. But for the most of the universe, I show up and I'm not known from anywhere, and most of the cast you're talking about. So for the fans of the show, for most of them, we're just the people on that show.
Right.
I mean, we are the family that they've fallen in love with. However you feel about Jim and Pam, and they kind of see us in a weird way, even though we're only in those few episodes. A year later when they're talking about, something to do with the family or the kids or his sister or blah, blah, blah. People have a reference point. So it's like we exist now in the world as that thing. And we're exclusively that thing. Whereas Tom Selleck is Tom Selleck playing Courtney Cox's boyfriend. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like, so when a convention comes and we show up, that's the appreciation. I think what you're talking about. Why not only has the show become beloved, everyone who is on it has become beloved in that role.
Right.
However, and the beauty of the people that put the show together is we all got our catchphrases. We all got our funny moments. We all had our turn in the sun. We all had our spotlight. Do you know what I mean? The stars of other shows don't usually, they aren't so deferential to the people who show up on the show. You're just there to support. But, you know, on this show, everyone, you know, there was enough spotlight for everyone. Do you know what I mean? Steve and John and Jenna, they weren't deprived of anything by being so generous with us to like have our moments, you know. So when I'm signing those autographs, you know, they all have their lines they want to hear me say, you know what I mean, too. And that's the brilliance of the writing team, the producing team, the directing, you know, and the people that put it together, the editor, all that, you know. So I see why it's different, because I don't think there are that many shows exclusively like you say. Most of these conventions are for you know, horror, and then you can have a horror convention because you can spread the blanket out and everything. But how many standalone shows have 15,000 people show up and pay the kind of prices? And I mean, let's be honest, it's not it's not cheap. You know, people are investing some serious cash to be there. It's one of the reasons when I meet them, like, I'm grateful, you know.
You know, at the convention, every single one of you, whether it was for 10 seconds or 10 years, you meant something to people. And if that's included in your dash at the end of the day, you know what? You can't ask for more. So now I have to really ask you, because I do want to get this in. You break off from acting, and you start to create, and you're directing. And I did not get to watch your movie, the movie that I wanted to see, because I really wanted to ask you about working with Will Patton.
No, I can't talk about it until you see it. Sorry.
Damn it. Damn it.
Kidding. That's fair. Follow-up question in Chicago. We'll do a follow-up question in Chicago.
Will Patton kicked ass.
I'm totally kidding. I'll talk about, I'm just being a funny. I think I'm funny.
Yes, you are. That was funny. That was funny. You upset me.
There are two types of actors. Actors who just do, right, and just like show me my line, show me, and I'm not saying one's better than the other. I just, in my observation, actors kind of tend to be either I want to know about everything, I want to know the whole thing, I want to know about the, you know, what he's doing, I want to know what everyone's doing here, I want to know, you know. And there are actors that are like thoroughbred horses that just put me in the gate, show me my lines, and I'm just going to run, and they don't want to know about any of it. You know, for them, it's all just about, you know, let me be this character and rip. I happen to be one of those actors that every time I was on set, I was curious about the entire process. So, right?
Yep.
And they're not all like that. We're not all like that. That's why I was sitting there watching them shoot scenes of The Office that I wasn't in, and not back at Crafty, or not just hanging out with, you know, Tug making jokes or whatever, which I also did on occasion, but I can't help it. When I'm on set, I want to watch. I want to see what's going on. And I got really, really lucky with my first job, which also a New Jersey show, Oz. And the beauty of that environment, which in a weird way does, even though the subject matter and the tone of the shows are totally different, it was as creative, as inviting, as collaborative, as it was just, I couldn't have had a better first job. And without knowing I wasn't supposed to be watching everything they were making when I wasn't working, I just did. And no one ever told me I couldn't. Right. So I continued on my career thinking, oh, I get to watch. Right. It was only till a little bit later that I realized, oh, maybe I'm not, maybe some of these shows don't want me watching. Maybe they want me to get the hell out of the way. Except I got really good at watching and not being in anyone's way. So I just did it. That led ultimately to me having a moment of artistic empowerment, of saying, you know what? No one's ever going to make me the lead in their movie. I mean, maybe they will one day. I don't know. Maybe there's no never. But I know that if I want to do it, the higher probability is if I create it myself and do it myself. So I wrote a movie for myself.
I love that.
It was a very personal story. It was something that was kind of, here's the thing, there are so many obstacles to creating a movie that if you can give it up for any reason, every reason will come your way to give it up. Right? So it's got to sustain you through every obstacle.
Right.
That the desire to tell this story has got to be so personal. And so that the 1,000 times that I quit, there were 1,001 times that I said, all right, let me see. Let me try again. So that's ultimately what I did. And I happened to be living at a time where as I'm observing the industry, and that was my film school. So I'm that actor who likes to observe. So I'm actually putting myself through film school by constantly watching what everyone's doing and how they're doing it, and listening how the director talks, you know what I mean? And blah, 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 everything. So 20 years in the business, I start thinking, but I started writing that script about 2002, after 9/11, because that was part of the inspiration for the first movie. But I had been an actor for 5, 6, 7 years. So it wasn't like that I went 20 years and did this.
Sure.
I actually started writing it in 2002. I just didn't get to make it until 2012.
That's familiar.
You know, I had to carry this thing around for 10 years. And part of the reason I had to carry it around was I just couldn't get it financed, you know what I mean? And it just, but also I started seeing the technology change and that I could make movies cheaper and cheaper, you know what I mean? That the reality was there was a democratization of how you could make a film. It wasn't going to be $2 million, $3 million, which, you know, sounds like a lot, but it isn't for a movie. I started to see the possibility for a micro budget, like how do I make a $30,000, $40,000 film?
Right.
And websites like Kickstarter start showing up, and it's like, oh, you can crowdfund these things, and everyone. So no one's out $30,000, $40,000. People might invest in you $500. Mm-hmm. That, you know, let's make Blake, see if Blake can make his dream come true. And so that's what I did. I kind of did these two things. And all of it out of necessity to tell the story, necessity, and by any means possible. And how do I create a movie for whatever resources I have? And I went to college for business. So I applied all of that understanding to my business of how do I get this film made? And the simple answer is this: you don't have to pay for everything. You just need to have everything you need to make a movie. But there's a lot of ways to assemble that. So that's one of the things that I did, is how do I build a bridge to all the things I need to make this movie? And many of them have to be, I don't pay for them. Like I put my entire cast and crew from out of town in this one home because this lovely family donated the use of their home to us in that community to make that movie. So just things like that. How do you build that bridge? And the businessman in me figured it out. But also the creative in me had seen so many things that I had all these ideas about how I want to do it, how I'm going to do mine. And so I created a film, and that was The Sublime and Beautiful, very personal story. It's a family drama. And I would say, you know, we have these lightning strike moments if you're lucky enough to do 25 years in this business, you know, which I have been. And for me, one of those lightning strikes, one obviously being The Office, you know, Allison Jones, go meet her and getting cast a week later. Another one was getting the call from Slamdance that they had chosen my film for their 2014 program. If I had known the statistical odds of my movie playing their festival, I probably wouldn't have submitted it. I probably would have I just didn't know at the time, but they picked it. They loved it, and they embraced me as a filmmaker. And that started me to being, I just write now. I write creatively. I have 3 scripts I'm currently working on, 2 films, 1 movie. I think they're really good. I think my writing has gotten so much better. They're winning all kinds of awards in major writing competitions. And I'm planning to direct more films. That first film got me hired to direct the second film, The Scent of Rain and Lightning, which I didn't write. The one that starred Will Patton, amongst others, Micah Monroe, Maggie Grace, Bonnie Bedelia, Mark
that's right, Bonnie
Webber,
Bedelia was in
Justin
there.
Chatwin. It's just a phenomenal cast. But it was based on a New York Times bestselling book. It took place in that world because my first film was in Lawrence, Kansas, in that surrounding area. And this film was set in Kansas, but we shot it in Oklahoma. Tax rebates, all those types of things. But the book itself is set in Kansas. But those filmmakers saw my first film at a film festival and a relationship started. And then they started sharing the script with me and we started talking about it. And I was like, yeah. And we did. We had significantly more resources. So we were able to have a few more shoot days and a bigger cast and get it. And people responded to the film. And fortunately for me, I think every cast member that said yes to being in this first film saw what I did with my first film and responded to it. They at least thought, oh, this guy can direct actors. He gets performances. I mean, I'm really proud of how that $30,000 film showed up.
I was going to say, and that's what I wanted to ask was, so $30,000 is the actual number, correct? That's the actual number. And 12 days.
Yeah. Okay, let me be totally transparent because nobody is transparent. So I'm going to be transparent. I got through production with $29,000 and change. 20,000 of it, give or take, was from a Kickstarter, and the other 9,000 was from some close friends and family who had pitched in that $9,000 prior to me running the Kickstarter for the 20,000. One of the families that lent me that house and saw what I was doing and trying to do and came visited set and just responded to me and my efforts gave me $3,000 after we made the movie because they knew I would need money to finish the film. Sure. They didn't know how much, whatever, and they were just benefactors and they just liked me and they liked what I was trying to do. And they saw how we treated everyone and everything, and they said, "Okay, I'm going to write you a check," and they gave me $3,000. That film for that $32,000 was the film that played at Slam Dance. At Slam Dance, small distributors were interested in distributing that film, and not to get too into the weeds technically, that film couldn't have gone on the internet. It couldn't have streamed. It couldn't, because we needed a final sound mix. We needed, everything was temporary. I mean, I had gotten a score, I had gotten a color, I had relationships, so I pulled everyone in. So that film was pretty close to the finished film. It's just not a film that I could technically deliver, because even that $32,000 film, we got a limited theatrical release. It did play in 10 or 12 theaters when it went out streaming. It seems the things that I write about are the things that cause me pain, and it's an effort to turn pain into art, and I haven't.
So beautiful.
I wish I could take exclusive rights for that, but I think I've heard songwriters talk about that. I've heard other artists. I've heard Van Gogh talk.
Right. But just the way that you said that was just so beautiful.
What do we do as human beings? We take our pain and we turn it into art so that we can survive this madness that we experience. And also, and it's just part of our fundamental coding or whatever to say, hey, look, I see you. Do you see me? This is what I see. What do you think? But we all want to be seen and heard, and hopefully there are people in our lives that will say, I see you. I get it. I know for me, it's easier for me to talk about a specific project and that sort of thing, is a mass, as this unwieldy, like bigger than. I know it's Sublime and Beautiful. When I wrote it, I really dialed in on this one mission statement. I wanted anyone who had experienced any legitimate, profound grief to feel seen and heard by my film, because I felt sort of betrayed in my experience of watching films about grief, because they all looked like they were lying to me. Mm-hmm. They all felt a little bit off. And that thing that was off about them was that they're made for a lot of money and usually, and they have to try and recover that money. So they can't really tell the truth about grief, which is it just fucking sucks and you just get stuck. And movies aren't allowed to be stuck. Do you know what I mean? But a movie for $30,000 can do whatever it wants because no one's looking to be paid back. So I was like, okay, here's my opportunity. I am not making it for $2 million. No one needs their $2 million back. So I can make a movie about a person who is legitimately stuck in their grief, this thing. sideswipes them. And that was the inspiration. And also, I couldn't deal with 9/11. I was in New York the day of 9/11. I actually saw the second impact because I was a bellman at the Morgan Hotel. So I was safe a few miles north, but I looked up because people were looking up the street. And it just so happened as they looked up, and I had just started my shift like an hour earlier, the second plane smashed through. So from behind, I couldn't see that it was a plane. I only saw the explosion. But because I saw the explosion and the other fire was already burning, I immediately knew what the world would come to know later, which was this is terrorism, because because nothing else made sense in my head. So I had my own relationship with 9/11, having witnessed it, but from a safety.
Yeah.
I was on Madison Avenue and 30, it's at the Morgan Hotel, whatever it was, 34th Street, something like that, looking down. But because I was in a hotel in New York, the coming weeks and months were really, really like no time period I've ever experienced, which is almost everyone staying there was working the grounds.
Yep.
Sure.
Or you're gonna get me cry twice in one podcast. Fuck you. All right. Or they were there for recovery.
Sorry.
They were there. There were a lot of people that came to recover loved ones and go to their apartments and clear them out. It was a really, really tough place to be. I couldn't deal with any of all that. Right. So me as an artist, I told a very singular, small story. Like that felt macro, and I dealt with it micro, not macro. Sure. I just have a family that's impacted by sudden tragedy. And really the inspiration for that was the sudden tragedy of 9/11. Of like, you wake up one day and everything in your world is different. So that's kind of but what you're talking about in terms of creative artistic process, we could probably do a whole other podcast on it. You know what I mean? Where do ideas come from? I had kind of knowingly, I kind of went back and been preparing myself to be a creator for years without knowing I just like to learn and understand and know the process and see how it came. I didn't know if I could write a script. In fact, if any listener is still watching your podcast by now, and I hope they are, but I don't know how
we'll be editing. So
I don't know how attentive your fan base is. I have this thing in my head that I'm boring. So
who's this fucking office guy?
That's what I overcome. That's what I deal with. Anyway, if you're still here and listening, let me share this. I never had a teacher. In fact, I'd had teachers tell me I couldn't write. I never had anyone tell me I could. So I had to care enough about it and needed to write so deeply inside me that I had to overcome the fact that no one ever said, you can do this. You're good at this. In fact, all I could point to were times where I wrote where people said, oh, you're not good at this. You suck. You're not good. So somehow I want to, if anyone's still listening out there and I could point to that and say, look, that nobody encouraged me. That's a bad thing. Or I could look at it and say, somehow I needed to write so deeply that I did it in spite of no one ever saying, you're any good at this. And somehow I did it anyway. And I would say, anyone who's listening, do the thing that you know you need to do in spite of what anyone has ever told you about it. Do it. 100%. You make your movie. If you need to make your movie, make your movie. Do it on your terms. And so I think that's kind of what happened with me with my movie. I had to do it anyway. And some of it was vanity. Some of it was I wanted to be a lead in a movie. But that wouldn't have sustained all the rejection, all the hard times, all the no's. You know what I mean? There had to be something so deeply inside me that had to be expressed. And then once that happened, I don't know. I heard it's David Lynch talk about it. Once you get an idea that you handle well, the universe will give you more ideas. Like once you get an idea, if you're able to somehow handle it well, and I think he's talking about have the determination, the grace, the humility, the tenacity to see it through, which I did somehow with the Sublime and Beautiful, that the present will be that the universe will give you more ideas. And that's kind of what's happened to me. I've since had more ideas. I've written a movie about a girl in Kansas who, through horrible circumstances, ends up pregnant. She's 15. She's in a state that doesn't want her to have an abortion. No one's going to help her, and everything about it is against it. But somehow she knows that's what she needs, and she finds her way to it with the help of an unlikely partner. So I wrote that, and it was inspired by an episode of Rachel Maddow talking about how hard it is in Kansas and about how they killed the abortion clinic doctor there and everything. And so I decided it caused me so much grief and pain. And then when I started looking statistically in the numbers of like, I'm a parent of two, a 22-year-old and 20-year-old daughter. And I saw, if I told you this statistic, it would horrify you. Less than 3% of all rapists ever see any time in jail.
And that
actually,
that doesn't shock me.
Surprise. It's horrifying, but it doesn't surprise me.
3% though? Like
from
I thought for sure it was going to be in the 30, 40. I mean, I knew it was going to be something horrible, but 3%.
And just because of the cases that have been brought out in media attention, the kid from California, privileged life, privileged this, that, and the other thing, all of those things. And I hate to say that it doesn't shock me. That actually kind of, again, as a dad to 3 daughters, 100%, I
still hear it, and I still say I'm still shocked. So as a creative, artistic, thoughtful, whatever, I had to write something about it. I had to put my story. I had to put my spin on it. I'm very proud of the script. I'm determined to make it. I'm still looking for financing. The right person has to come along. It deals with, and it's funny, there's humor in this movie. Sublime and Beautiful has no humor. It's devoid of humor. But this movie does, and it has an optimism and a hopefulness and a thing. And I do think there's funny comedic moments in it. But essentially, I'm horrified at the world that women live in, and just how much of how easy it is for us to kind of point to things like, oh, it's so much better here than anywhere else. You know what I mean? That, oh, we're in America. Why are they what's the complaint? They could be in Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever. Well, is that really the true barometer? Is that, because I'm telling you, when I look at the statistics, because another statistic that just horrified me is they're not being raped by strangers. Stranger rape is just almost non-existent. It's just such a small fraction. It's always someone who that woman should have had on their side.
Right.
Should have been someone who cared, someone who. And I just had to write a movie about it. It bothered me so much it couldn't leave. So I wrote, and really the singular thought was, I'm going to write a story about a rape victim who needs an abortion, that if you can't get behind her, you can't get behind anyone. And then it's not about the politics of it, but I want an audience to see a movie about someone. If you can't get behind this 15-year-old girl, and sort of care about her and be like, well, is this what we're really putting this girl through? Is this what the world is? Because people look at it and go, this can't be true. And I'm like, sadly, this is more true than not.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, this is the fucking world for too many women. We are not taking care of the women in America.
Correct.
And anyone who thinks we are, and then you look at the politics and what's going on lately. I mean, I wrote this movie years ago. A few years, I actually started writing it the day we went into COVID lockdown. Again, being an artist who needed an outlet, I started writing it literally the day. I'd been percolating for a few months, but as soon as they said, okay, we're all shutting down, I needed to have something creative to do. That's just who I am. I'm wired. So I started writing it. And that's one movie. And then I have a horror film that's literally about what is really a monster. And in this world, the monster is actually, it's based on a Latino horror, like the boogeyman for them. It's called El Coco.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on a Mayan. I mean, no one knows exactly where it came. It goes back to the Mayans, but in South America, in Latin America, there's all kinds of versions of this monster. But in my movie, this monster comes to this immigrant farming community in Southern California, and it starts killing Caucasian people. And the FBI sends someone to investigate this, but the community is predominantly Hispanic. It's Latin. It's not Caucasian. Turns out it's kind of this otherworldly character. And the point of the movie being, what's really a monster? Because in this community, that monster, the monster of the movie, is actually not the worst monster. For this community, ICE and the politics and the racism is more monstrous than a real monster in my movie. And that's kind of the juggling drama. It's like, oh, wait a second, this movie is about this horrible thing that literally, it's a slasher film. Literally, it has blades for fingers and slashes things apart. But I hope when people watch it, they start to think, well, maybe the politics of the day are actually more monstrous than this monster for this community.
Absolutely. And I have to ask you, because it's one of my favorite shows and one of Gina's favorite shows, and we love watching it. And I don't think we're going to watch an episode tonight, but what was it like to work with the cast and crew of Criminal Minds?
Oh,
yeah,
God.
that's a good.
I have to
Speaking
go
of
back.
monsters and horror.
Yeah, I have to go in the Wayback. I wish it was just right there for me.
Well,
but you put me in the Wayback Machine. Criminal Minds.
So the episode,
yeah,
his interaction was with Emily Prentice, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Who was on Friends?
Who, yes, was on Friends. And
she's wonderful.
She's love her character. She is, the more I watch it, the more it's always easy to like JJ, because she's JJ. She's a very likable character, but the character of Emily Prentice, and especially now with the newer episodes too, like she is like female empowerment. Like I just love her.
She let the hair go. She let the hair go gray without dyeing it, and she's I am woman, hear me roar, and I love it.
And she's so beautiful.
Yes.
And
she's gorgeous.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's who she is. And that's why that character took that, because they started, you know what I mean? Those things happen because, much like The Office, and so many of the characters are so close to who they were because the brilliance of the creators were like, wait, Creed is too good to not have in the show, so he gets to be a part of it, but it's because he's Creed.
Yeah.
And they see the opportunity. You start to think, I mean, I remember this on Oz. I was like, are they writing for me, or am I teaching? You know what I mean? There becomes this sort of assimilation of who's leading who. Right. You start to wonder if you're starting to carry the thing. Again, I'm overstepping because I don't know, but I know a little bit about her. But I recently read something where she talked about her refusal to get plastic surgery as an aging actress.
Good for her.
That sounds familiar. Yes.
Good for her.
Kind of recent, whatever. I didn't work with her that much, but I remember thinking she's just one of the good ones, just lovely human being, just a wonderful person. Sadly, the horrible experiences are the ones that kind of stay with you in your bandwidth.
Sure.
Like the ones that are really, really good because you have. I mean, I'm so, again, I don't want to knock because she's sleeping, my puppy, and I don't want to wake her up by knocking on wood. But I've been so lucky to have had, I don't know, I'm pushing 80 or 90 professional IMDb credits, not including theatrical and stuff. That's a lot. And when I got out of acting school, I'll say this, when I got out of acting school in 1994, if someone had approached me and said, hey, I can tell you you're going to be sitting on this rock and horror podcast show, and you're going to have 80 credits, and you're going to have been on Broadway, and Rita Moreno's going to have come to see you in your play. You're going to have had done all these things, and you're going to have been on this show called The Office. And they told me I was going to be sitting in this moment having exactly what I have. And I got to be honest, I struggle every day with rejection and wanting more and feeling not good enough and aspiring and not knowing where the next paycheck is going to come and pay the bills. And so it's not an altruism of this is the most amazing, I'm amazing. It's not that. But as an actor getting out of acting school, you told me I could have had this, I would have signed that paper. I would have said, I'll do that deal. With all the hiccups, all the ups and downs. So I feel very blessed. And I would factor Criminal Minds into that. It was a lovely casting office. I love Scott David, the people that cast that show. I had worked with them theatrically. They seemed like they cared and liked me. I did a play for them. So that whole experience was good. Jennifer, who was on Party of Five, who played the woman who was kind of more central to the storyline, right? It was kind of her.
Yep.
She was kind of the potential victim with, I believe there was an arsonist murder type thing going on, and he was picking off these people, and she was going to this. I'm really reaching into it now, but I believe she was showing up at like one of those groups. I don't know if it was like
Yes.
an AA,
Yes.
right? Something like
Yep.
that. And he was, he felt like he was doing them a favor by removing them of their pain.
They had just lost, there was like a fire in a school.
Yeah.
And so the people that were affected
right.
by the loss of the children, he was going around making it look like various suicides.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he felt like he was absolving them of their pain.
Yes.
I mean, so
Yes.
total Criminal Minds MO,
Yes.
crazy, insane person who needs to be stopped, who's just,
Yes.
and I remember even the actor who did it, who's done a lot of things, was a really good actor. I remember.
Yeah. We found
done a lot.
When we watch something, like, she knows, she goes, yep, there goes Rob with IMDb. Always Rob with the IMDb.
We have like this code. I'll be like, that's a person. And all I have to do is say, that's a person. And there he is. And he's rattling off.
So part of me hates
you know what?
What's that?
Well, you know what? I think it's cut the divorce rate in this country down by 50%. Whatever it was before the internet and IMDb, it was 50% higher, because I remember, I'm old enough to remember my parents would fight over these things like tooth and nail, like, there's no way that's the person from that movie, blah, blah, blah. And there was no way of settling this argument. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when this argument could last weeks, and like literally divorce papers could be drawn over a guest star on a TV show being so-and-so. No way, that's not that person. And now all of these arguments, much like directions, much like fighting over directions, have just gone. They're gone from the face of planet Earth. My parents fought over the directions to get from point A to point B. Like, I don't know how a marriage survived it. I don't know why people are getting divorced anymore now, because you can find out who is who in what show and how to get from point A to point B from anywhere now. What is our problem? What is our problem? Why aren't we staying married?
And I think it might be Amazon. Amazon Prime.
Amazon runs IMDb.
They have you're right.
Because they own everything. Yes. Don't let anyone know.
Jeff Bezos.
When it started, they didn't own it. They decided they wanted it, and they own it.
And they bought it.
Yes.
So
they're going to own everything eventually.
They have X-ray, that X-ray thing when you're watching Prime Video, and you don't even have to look up IMDb because it's built into the fucking thing. So it's like, who is on the screen right now? And it says Blake Robbins, holy shit. But I think that episode, you may have had, I think subconsciously, I may have seen your name come across the screen, when they come back from the credits and, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I didn't think anything of it. And then all of a sudden you were there. And I think I said to you, I said, that's Blake. I said, that's him. That's Jim Halpert's brother.
Like, we're friends. Like, that's the guy from the barbecue last Friday.
Exactly. So, and that's happened now. So, I mean, it's happened with Jackie, and other people in my sphere.
There's a marketing term. There's a marketing term for it. It's called cognitive dissonance. Once you connect with something, like once you go buy a white Prius, all you're going to see on the road are all the white Priuses. Once you see, like, I'm a fan of The Office, and once I know The Office, it's like 6 degrees of every show is going to have someone from The Office is going to show up.
For sure.
So it's good. I mean, I guess it's good for us. You bring up a funny thing. Most of the time I'm recognized, it's not like, oh my God, you're blah, 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 blah from, it's usually like, do we go to school together? I'm like, no. Are you in my church? Do you go to church? This church? No. About the second question, that's like something obvious. And if I don't recognize them, like can place them from my life, I go, I act. I'm sometimes on television. Then it starts clicking like, oh, because their immediate reaction is, I know this guy. He shows up in my life somewhere, and they can't place what it is because it's not nailed down. Like, I do have a career where it's not nailed down to that one thing.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a marketing term. There's a marketing term for it. It's called cognitive dissonance. Once you connect with something, like once you go buy a white Prius, all you're going to see on the road are all the white Priuses. Once you see, like, I'm a fan of The Office, and once I know The Office, it's like 6 degrees of every show is going to have someone from The Office is going to show up.
For sure.
So it's good. I mean, I guess it's good for us. You bring up a funny thing. Most of the time I'm recognized, it's not like, oh my God, you're blah, 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 blah from, it's usually like, do we go to school together? I'm like, no. Are you in my church? Do you go to church? This church? No. About the second question, that's like something obvious. And if I don't recognize them, like can place them from my life, I go, I act. I'm sometimes on television. Then it starts clicking like, oh, because their immediate reaction is, I know this guy. He shows up in my life somewhere, and they can't place what it is because it's not nailed down. Like, I do have a career where it's not nailed down to that one thing.
Right.
Sure.
You know, like a lot of actors do get pegged as this thing. And so it's immediately
Jackie stripper.
Most of the time for me, it's like, where do I know you from?
Right.
For about 2 years, I was the guy from the Hanes sock commercial, because that Hanes sock commercial was on all the time.
Okay.
Now, see, there's the thing I gotta find now.
There's the picture he's searching for.
See if you can find me in the Hanes sock commercial. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. I mean, honestly, it was the gift that kept giving. It played for like 7 years.
Everything is on YouTube.
Almost everything.
And what were you on? And what are you on playbill.com so I can look up your Broadway credits?
I think so. I appreciate that you said credits, like there's many of them, but it was credit.
Oh, credit.
I did. I was in The Man Who Had All the Luck, which was Arthur Miller's first play that was revisited through what was the theater? The Roundabout Theater.
Okay.
With Scott Ellis put it on, and I was an understudy for 3 of the characters, and I showed up for the table read. And there's a big square rectangle table. It's a big cast, like Jim Rebhorn. I mean, Chris O'Donnell was in it, Samantha Mathis, a bunch of great veteran character actors. Richard Reilly was in it. And so great cast. And I was an understudy, just covering 3 of the roles.
So you were like a swing.
Yeah. So stories are running through my head. So I'm going to cover 3 of these roles. And for some reason, the way that the nameplates, the little name tags are put up, I'm like right on the corner of the head table where Scott Ellis is sitting next to Arthur Miller. At the time, I was like, I'm way too close to the front row here for my comfort. I really want to be in the back at the other side of the table, but you have to sit where they put the thing out. And we took our first break, and the first thing out of Scott Ellis's mouth is, when does Oz come back? And I was like, I just got this job because you're a fan of Oz. And he was like, well, you were good. You were good.
That's so cool, though.
It's okay.
Got this job.
It's okay.
I just came in. I guess I could have acted myself out of a job, but he was a big Oz fan. I ended up in it, and and I got to meet Arthur Miller, and
that's awesome.
And I was doing Oz at the time, and when I did get to go on, here's another nice thing, because it was unbeknownst to me. Rita Moreno, who was on Oz and who is a legend, then and still is. I mean, she was so nice and so friendly and such a great person. Again, like The Office, Oz, just a beautiful, beautiful group of people and a large ensemble show, and everyone pulling the right direction for the right reasons. So she found out when I was doing this performance, because she knew so-and-so was going to be missing the show, and that was one of the roles I was covering, because I didn't even know this would happen until my mom told me later. So they give you house seats, and they're the 10th row center, basically. And I was given because Scott knew the director, and they were like, invite your family, we know you're going on this night. So my parents came down from Boston, north of Boston, and they were there that night. And my mom sits down, and sitting right next to her is Rita Moreno.
Oh my God.
Now, here's the thing, at this point, I don't think my mom had even seen Oz, so she didn't know that I knew Rita, whatever. But she was and she was stunned, and she's turned and she said, "Oh my gosh," and something. And they ended up in a conversation, and Rita said, "I'm here to see a couple of friends." And she named one of the other actors in the show, and she said, "And Blake Robbins." And my mom said she just almost fell on the floor. She was like, "That's my son. That's my son. That's why we're here." She's like, "I didn't know you knew him." She goes, "Well, we worked together on Oz." My mom could not believe that they were both sitting there to see Blake Robbins in an Arthur Miller play. It was kind of ridiculous.
What a fun moment for your mom, though.
Crazy. Well,
yeah.
and my dad, who was next to her, but probably didn't get a word in edgewise. But yes.
And as much as I love Rita Moreno, I think I might have been more like about Arthur Miller. So
yeah. For opening night, he signed baseball because there was a strong baseball theme in the show. The show was his very first play. I think he wrote it when he was like 21, and it did run on Broadway. It did run on Broadway way back, but it only ran for like a month. It was just a big bomb. But then Arthur Miller became Arthur Miller. And so one of the things Scott Ellis and the Roundabout did was, well, now all these themes are through all his plays. And even though his plays have gotten better, it's historically important to kind of show the context of like where a lot of these stories were still percolating and starting. I mean, there was very much the father-son thing. There was very much the fate versus free will. How much, control of our own destiny do we have? All these big things. He was, even as a 20-year-old beginning playwright, writing a less than stellar play, was working on.
I think that's what we should all strive for as writers. Is, I want to become so well known as a writer that they will go and produce like
worst thing I did.
Thing I ever did like right at the beginning. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing. I'm really sorry I made you cry twice.
No, it's good. It's good.
Hey, you know what? If that's my calling card, that's my calling card. I make people cry.
Barbara Walters.
There you go. But thank you so much for taking out this time.
Sure.
For Gina and me and our cat Obsidian upstairs that is meowing. Love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. And I am out. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night, Ray. Say good night.
No.
Good night.